the argument that, oh, you're going to screw up your thyroid, you're going to get electrolyte imbalances, you're going to mess with your hormones. Well, then how did we exist during the ice ages going north? And how are the Inuits alive now? How am I alive now? Low thyroid is devastating. It can be fatal. And when a pregnant woman has low thyroid, that is very, very damaging to the child. You get a condition called cretinism, which is very obvious. They have short stature. They have physical changes to their facial characteristics, and they have a very low intelligence. It really damages the development of their brain. And so, and you call someone, oh, you cretin or something, that's what they're referring to. Like all the best insults are actually like medical terms and things like that. Like idiot, that actually means someone who has an IQ in the range between 0 and 30. Imbecile is 30 to 50. And then moron was, 70 to 90 or something like that. And, 50 to 70 or something like that. Yeah. And so now, and that's like been all the insults. Now they've changed those since then because they've had these negative, stigmas and things like that. But so that cretinism is a very devastating congenital condition. You would have an entire population of people with cretinism in those conditions if carbohydrates cause that. But you don't, and you have these people living generationally and perpetually without that. And so that's clearly not happening. So that doesn't even really pass the smell test. And they're, with all the different, WHO guidelines on eating and all these different sorts of governmental recommendations, all of these people are still agreed that there's no such thing as an essential carbohydrate. You do not have to eat carbohydrates at all in your life. There are multitudes of examples of entire civilizations that have never eaten carbohydrates. So that's certainly not the case. You do not have to eat carbs. And I would argue that you're better off without them. But if you want to eat them, great. But you certainly don't have to have them.
It's such a good point. I mean, if you look at the sort of the etiology of hypothyroidism, a lot of it is autoimmune, caused by poor food choices. It's not eating, pasture-raised eggs and ghee butter and ribeye, right? Yeah. So a lot of people that receive medical benefit or therapeutic nutrition lifestyle benefits, it's by omitting some of these foods, eggplant or tomatoes or things like that. Which leads me to suggest and confirm what you were saying is we're removing that smoldering background inflammation, allowing the immune system to self-regulate and have tolerance and not attack its own tissue like the thyroid. So you bring up a great point on that. I
was just going to make a quick point on the thyroid. Like you say, like it can be autoimmune driven. We see, I have a number of patients with Hashimoto's thyroiditis, and there's a lot of people that come to functional medicine clinics because they're just a little off. They're having weight problems and things aren't just working right. Quite a lot of these have underlying Hashimoto's, like a number of them, a lot more than you would sort of expect. But that's sort of selecting for a particular population that are really having trouble losing weight. There's something wrong, and so. We find that there's a number of these people have Hashimoto's or even developing Hashimoto's, and we have since put them on a carnivore diet. All of them have recovered or beginning to recover. Obviously, they're in different stages, but every single one that we've put on a carnivore diet has made significant improvements. Reduced their antibody level and gained functionality in their thyroid as well. There was Dr. Paul Mason out of Sydney who has a lot of great videos on like low carb down under. Well, I'll be actually speaking at this later this year in Gold Coast. He had a great lecture on lectins and how these can actually be precipitating the autoimmune issues. They get into your body, via leaky gut, and so now they're physically in your body. They're not supposed to be there; should just pass right through. But now your body recognizes these things as harmful. They're creating antibodies towards them. And because these things are similar enough to some people with certain genetics, that they are then, through molecular mimicry now attacking, part of your body as well. And so you get this spillover effect, attacking the lectin, and now those things are still in your system. And so they're attacking that part of your body as well. And by removing these lectins, not eating these things, healing your leaky gut, all of a sudden your body's not trying to create antibodies for those lectins. Now you don't have a whole bunch of antibodies in your body, and they're not attacking your thyroid or causing Crohn's or ulcerative colitis or anything like that. And so I thought that was quite interesting as well as a physiological mechanism for autoimmune.
That's huge. And then translating that to the brain, the neuroinflammation, that's an area that I know you study a lot about. And as a neurosurgeon, you're going in and is it laparoscopic, or you're like making incision in the actual skull? And then is that a lot of like your day-to-day stuff as a physician?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a number of different things. You certainly can go endoscopically. There are some procedures that you do. You sort of do like a burr hole, like just a little hole in the bone there. And then, depending on what you're doing, you would pass a little probe through. It'll be blunt. If you sort of put a needle through, it will cut its way through and it'll damage all the cells in between, which is pretty devastating, can cause bleeds. But if you have it rounded, blunted, and you push through, it actually just pushes a lot of the cells and axons to the side, and so it causes less damage. I mean, I'm sure they're damaging things, but they're much less damage. Because the brain is very soft. It's like soft serve. Once you get past the sacs around the brain, the dura, which are quite tough, once you get into the actual brain itself, it's literally like soft serve ice cream. I mean, you can just push through without any effort. It's just mush. Wow. Yeah. And so you pass this probe through, and then you can sort of, through that same track, put your endoscope, which is, probably 0.5 centimeter wide. And then you go in, then you're in the ventricles, which is the hollow spaces inside the brain, which is where the cerebral spinal fluid would form. And you go in there and you can sort of look around and grab things if you want. If you're doing something in the ventricles, that's a good approach for that. Otherwise, you might have a different approach. If you're going for a tumor and you're trying to resect the tumor, then you make a bigger incision and a craniotomy. It's just taking out a bony window. However big for what you're doing, and you take that off, you get through the dura, and then you're able to get into the brain and sort of use bipolar and sort of cauterize around the tumor and try to bring that sucker out en bloc. And it's or you have like traumas, and you have different sorts of approaches for that. You might have to take off, do like a hemicraniectomy where you do like a very big incision, like a question mark down on the side of the head, and then you take off all of the bone on that side, and you sort of get this acute bleed. Because when you bleed, we think of blood as liquid, but of course it coagulates, and so it turns into this big clot. And so if it's new blood, it's just this big thick clot, and you have to take off. You can't just pop a little hole and just drain blood because it's just thick. So you have to take off a big chunk of bone so you can get all this thick clot, so it's not compressing the brain. Because again, the brain is very soft, and so even congealed blood is enough to compress the brain.
That is wild. Just curious. I have another friend, Ryan, who's a neurosurgeon. He was really into video games in high school. Yeah. Did you play video games at all? Like his hand dexterity is like next level, because a lot of neurosurgery is like robotic and things like that. Was that part of your forte, or? I
did actually play video games. Yeah, I did like video games. Obviously now I can't really do that just because I do enjoy them. Like it just takes so much time, and I just don't have time. Especially now with like the podcasting and things like that on top, and trying to write up papers in a book and all that stuff. Like if I just started playing video games again, I just wouldn't be able to get anything done.
Time suck.
Yeah, but no, I've always liked video games, and and I've had that hand-eye coordination as well. Yeah, I'm sure that's helped with that as well. Yeah.
It's fascinating. I guess the question now where I was going with this is the histology of the brain. If someone has a lifetime of metabolic disease, fatty liver, congestive heart failure, atherosclerosis, is that sort of recognizable when you get into the brain? Can you sort of see, just as a gross observation, an unhealthy brain versus a healthy brain, or is gray matter? Like,
you can see different manifestations. Generally, when you're looking at unhealthy brain, you have like a bleed or compression. It's bruised and it's disease, and there's like a tumor under there. That's when you'll see distinctive visual differences. But you actually see actual browning of the bone in older people or sick people, in browning of the brain as well. It's called the Maillard reaction, where you're actually glycating and oxidizing like these different things. Like when you cook and you brown something, it browns it. That's the Maillard reaction, and we actually do this to ourselves. So you have someone who has who hasn't really been taking care of themselves. Someone who's like a kid, bone is like bright white. It's clean, it's white, it's pristine. You're like, that's a healthy looking bone. And then you get someone who's older, they've been smoking and drinking and not really taking care of those. That's actually browned. The bone itself is brown and yellowed. And so you can certainly see those sorts of things, when you get in the body.
Does it smell different as you're cutting into the skull? Can you kind of tell an unhealthy person by just the smell, or is it all?
I haven't really noticed that myself, but you probably could, but not that I've known so far. But I'll take a look for that.
It'd be interesting to see. But I think one of the more sort of fatal forms of cancer, really, we were talking about glioblastoma multiforme. Is that it?
Multiforme, yeah, or just GBM.
GBM. 5 year survival rate is like single digit percentage, right? But what we talked about, Thomas Seyfried and other people are using a metabolic approach to sort of ameliorate all the issues that are associated with that. Can you speak to how our metabolism? I mean, to me, it's just fascinating that you can change your diet, and then that improves the capacity of the body to recover from this really fatal tumor.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, as Professor Seyfried would say, if you understand the cancer biology to it, it's actually, it's not that difficult to imagine that this plays a huge role, or even that, know that it's going to play a huge role. Because, as he argues, and he makes a very, very strong case for it, is that cancer is actually a metabolic disease. It's not a genetic disease. A good example of this, which I pointed out and noticed, is that, since we made these massive dietary changes in the 1980s, we vilified meat and fat and started eating, we reduced our fat intake by 30% and cholesterol by 30%, reduced red meat by 33% or so, increased fruits and vegetables by 30 and 40% respectively, as well as grains and sugar as well. And, since then, all these different diseases, so-called chronic diseases, have increased. The obesity rate tripled, heart disease tripled, stroke rate tripled, cancer rates have tripled. Type 2 diabetes, autoimmune disorders, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, even neurodevelopmental delays such as autism have all increased exponentially. They almost didn't exist before then. Now they're the only things we treat. So that's not genetic, and they all increase at the same time, and so that's very suspicious, and I would bet that you would say that this is very likely to be diet related, but it is something happened in our environment. You as a population, if anyone who studied population genetics know that you cannot change a population's genetics like that in that short of time, even a number of generations. I mean, you need hundreds or thousands of generations to do something that dramatic genetically. So it's something in our environment. And so that means that something in our environment has affected our cancer rates, because our cancer rates have tripled. So it's not purely genetic, is it? Or maybe we're just getting exposed to so many more carcinogens that destroy our genetics. Maybe, but no one's really, shown that we've been doing it. We're getting less sun than we ever have. We're very conscious about, what we eat in the wrong direction, I'd say. We're smoking less, we're, drinking less, all these sorts of things, people are much more conscious about, and they're still getting these things. So Dr. Seyfried argues that this is really a disruption of our mitochondria. This is from a metabolic issue. We do know that people who go on a ketogenic diet, or just are in ketosis, their mitochondria are more healthy. They're better at oxidative phosphorylation, and they have more number. So they have like 4 times the number, and they're like 4 times as effective. So they're much, much better. They're giving you much better energy. When you get damaged mitochondria and they stop being able to go through oxidative phosphorylation, they go back to one of our primitive modes of energy generation, when life was still a single-celled organism, which was fermentation. And so they start fermenting glucose. And so they need a lot more glucose because it's not as efficient. And they'll start making lactic acid and other byproducts. And so they'll actually need 400 times the amount of glucose. So you can screw up your mitochondria in a number of different ways. And once they get to that point where they're not going back and they're only fermenting, then you can get pretty screwed, because it's the mitochondria that actually can then kick off reactive oxygen species that then damage your DNA. So he argues that this is actually an effect, an epiphenomenon of the damaged mitochondria. Not that they started, the genetics started it and then the rest happened. It was the mitochondria first. And then, which we see, like in tumors, like it's not just, all the cells don't just have the same genes. They're all different, and a lot of them have normal DNA and they act like cancer. The mitochondria are all screwed. The mitochondria are the gatekeeper. The mitochondria are what stop the cell from proliferating out of control, which is what cancer is. So when you get those damaged and screwed up, then you're going to be precipitating cancer. But when you go back on a keto diet or a carnivore diet, you are now severely limiting the food supply of those cancer cells because they need 400 times the amount of glucose to just run, right? And we've known this since like the 1930s with Otto Warburg, who won the Nobel Prize in medicine for this research into cancer. And he argued then that this was a metabolic disease driven by the mitochondria. And Seyfried has actually proven, he has over 150 peer-reviewed papers on the subject. And he's actually showed that Warburg was right. And there's actually more to it than that because there's glutamine, which is the most abundant amino acid in the body. This is actually something that cancers feed on as well. So you can take things like DAWN, which is an acronym for a large chemical name that I don't remember at the moment, that can actually limit the amount of glutamine. So this really, really works at suffocating and starving out these cancer cells. So when you go on a keto diet or a carnivore diet, you are really limiting the amount of energy that these cancer cells can get. So they're not going to be able to proliferate as well. Your body works just fine because your body works on, you're still at normal glucose levels, blood sugar levels, glycogen levels, but also now you have a bunch of ketones. So you're working great. Cancer cells cannot run on ketones because their mitochondria are screwed. And so they get severely limited by this. And your body is much better able to contain and kill these little bastards, which is trying to do the whole time. And you're also, not continuing this metabolic process of screwing up your mitochondria and your other cells and contributing to the whole problem. And so, he's shown in animal models that this is very, very, very effective way of treating cancer. And there are different groups around the country and around the world that are actually picking this up. Cedars-Sinai have actually started doing this and treating people metabolically, these metabolic treatments for cancer. Now, it is the rule that you have to exhaust traditional therapies first, chemo radiation first, before you get to go on to metabolic therapies. But, if someone just says, yeah, I'm not doing that crap, it's their body, they get to choose it. And so a number of people have. He's done a lot of research with GBM, which is the most aggressive form of primary brain tumor. And it's with treatment, without treatment from time of diagnosis is average 3-month life expectancy. With treatment, traditional treatment, chemotherapy and radiation, at the moment, the numbers are about 15 months. There are some new things coming out, new numbers coming out, probably looking closer to 2 years. That's great. But, published numbers right now are around 15 to 18 months from time of diagnosis. But you have people that Seyfried knows, and these people have been treating metabolically. They've never taken treatment. They've never taken chemo and radiation. They're still alive 8 years down the track. They've had surgery for debulking, but being just on keto, not even like carnivore, but like dirty carnivore sort of keto sort of thing. They're still, being alive and kicking 8 years down the track. And I have a friend, these are all anecdotal, obviously, but there's a ton of animal models that show that this is exactly what we're seeing. And, and it's just a matter of doing those studies in people. But I have a friend of mine that I sort of just said, hey, here's the research, here's some information, take a look at this. I really think this would help you. She was diagnosed with GBM about 6 years ago, and she's still here. Wow. She's got a husband and kids, and she's living a fairly normal life. She, at her 5-year check, MRI, she had no sign of disease, which is amazing. I don't know if she stopped being as strict. She was sort of dirty. She would sort of go back and forth, but a lot of it, what she was doing was meat, and she did sort of take what I was saying to heart. And then sort of at 6 years, it started to come back, and so she needed to get like a further debulking. But 6 years is absolutely unheard of for a GBM, and especially to be completely functional and home with your kids as well. Amazing. Yeah.
That's so cool.
Hey guys, just want to take a second to thank our sponsor, Carnivore Bar. I don't promote many products because honestly, all you need to be healthy is to just eat meat. For those times that you're out hiking, road tripping, or stuck at work and you want a nutritious snack that is just meat, fat, and salt if you want it. The carnivore bar is a great option. So I like this product not because it's just pure meat, but also because I want the carnivore market to thrive as well. And the more we support meat-only products, the more meat-only products there will be available in the mainstream. So if this sounds like something you'd like to get behind, check it out using my discount code Anthony to get 10% off, which also applies to subscriptions, giving you 25% off total. All right. Thanks, guys.
I mean, this should be front page news, but some people have this perception. We're all family and friends who would say, well, I can never just go on a carnivore diet, or I can never, what about bread? What about cookies? It's like, well, you can eat those foods and you're not going to live as long. It's amazing the addictive, going back to what we were talking about with honey or fruit or fructose. Like we have these rituals and habits and, sort of connection to this food that some people would rather live a shorter lifespan than live without those things. Like it's wild, which leads me to a question that I would love to dive further into is you retain a really good physique and you're strong and everything like that. What do you currently eat? How many meals a day? Are you tracking protein? Do you include organs? Like there's all sorts of ways to go about it. What's your personal approach?
Yeah, I almost exclusively eat just skeletal muscle meat and fat. I don't really eat too many organs, mostly through preference. Just they're not really what I want. I don't think you need them. I mean, I've been doing this 5 years in my early 20s, and the last 5 years now. I've eaten liver twice in the last 5 years. I don't think I ate liver at all before that. And I look at like people like the Inuit who didn't eat the organ meat, certainly didn't eat the liver, because the liver of marine mammals was highly toxic for its vitamin A levels. So even just eating a little bit of polar bear liver will kill you with the amount of vitamin A that it has in there. Seals are sort of just below that, like there's a step up the food chain with the polar bears because the polar bears are eating the seals. And so they have even more vitamin A, which stores in your liver, is fat soluble. It takes a long time to clear. And so they wouldn't eat that at all. They'd give that to their dogs. And, I know that people are proponents of eating organ meat and livers, and fine. They say, oh, look at wolves. Alpha wolf goes, directly for the liver and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, maybe, but we're not dogs. We're not wolves. We do know that in our relationship with dogs and wolves going back thousands and thousands of years, traditionally they got the organs and we got the meat. Lewis and Clark, the expedition across, America, they actually were talking about the same thing. They were hunting, they were eating meat, and they found that the people that fat was really, really the survival driver. So those who were getting more lean, weren't getting enough fat, they were dying. They were dying on this expedition. And so what they were doing is they were giving the lean cuts and they were giving the organs to the dogs that they were with. And they were going for the fattiest part, and those were the guys who survived. So I don't think that objectively you need organ meat. I don't think you need it. I also don't think that you need it in the proportions that some people get, because obviously if you're hunting an animal and you take down an animal, you have a liver, one liver for hundreds of pounds of animal meat. And so that's a very, very different proportion. So, if I took down a cow and I bought a cow from a butcher, that's going to feed me and my family for like a year or more. It's going to come with one liver, and so eating liver in a significant proportion every single day is out of proportion with what I would find if I was just hunting. So the idea of this, they would just eat nose to tail, isn't actually necessarily true, but even if it is, that's a very specific proportionality. But the Native Americans would traditionally, when they hunt, they would take down an animal and they would gut it, they would dress it, and they would actually cut off the hindquarters and they would hang those up as like an offering to the spirits or whatever. But really, I mean, look at this. This was the leanest part of the animal. They were hanging those up, and they would take down the forequarters and the steaks, and and they would take that back. They often didn't pack back the organs, but animals that eat, go for the belly, say, oh, they're going for the organs, they're going for the organs. Well, are they? Or are they going for the belly fat, which is the bacon, which has the most fat in the body? And there's a ton of abdominal fat, intra-abdominal fat. The omentum is just fat, and all this fat around the organs. So I would argue that they're probably going for the fat more than the organs, but either way, I don't think that we need organs. And if you're going to have organs, think about that proportionality, because even with a cow liver, eventually you can get vitamin A toxicities, and those are bad. Vitamin toxicity is just as bad as the vitamin deficiency. They can both be fatal. They can both cause serious harm. So mostly I'm just eating steaks, brisket, mostly beef. And I often will just eat once a day. So I'll eat just like a very big fatty meal until I'm full at night. And if I'm able to do that, I'm generally not hungry for like another 24 hours. Unless I'm very active and I'm working out a lot, lifting weights a lot, then I will find that my body just wants more, and I'll have, basically twice as much. So I'll usually double that. So I'm usually about, 2.5 pounds of fatty beef a day. And if I'm working out a lot, I might eat 4 to 5 pounds of meat in a day. And and that, when I'm able to do that, I can just stack on a lot of weight, when I'm working out as well, which is awesome. Great.
And how much are you training on average in the gym and stuff like that?
Yeah. When I can, I try to go 4 days a week. And then when I get into a rhythm, maybe I'll even go like 5 or 6 days a week. And I really try to push myself as hard as I can. If I don't have much time, no matter what I do, every set that I do, I'm always going to failure. If I have a spot, I'll go like, 3-4, reps past failure. And that's always great to be able to do that. And I find that is the most effective way of getting gains. I've worked out with a lot of people over the years that were, professional level athletes, and other people that were, just, wanted to work out, for fun, or for just to stay in shape and look good. And, the ones that get real results are those people that you just push yourself until you're exhausted. Nutrition is obviously very important as well. But I've worked out with people that just sort of do, 10 reps of something. They go, oh yeah, that was good. Oh, that felt good. But like, it was easy for them, and I find that if you are able to do 12 reps, if you can squeak out 12, but you stopped at 10, like you're really holding yourself back. I consider those last 2 the actual workout. Muhammad Ali said, they asked him, like, oh, how many, sets do you do? How many reps do you do? How many of these do you do? And he said, I have no idea. Like, I don't count. I get to the point that I'm tired, then I start counting to see how many more I can push myself to do. And so that's where you'll get the real results. And so when I'm able to work out, that's what I try to do. So I try to at least go 4 days a week, and put in extra days where I can, and then just going really, really hard. But with my schedule, it's been a lot less than that. Sometimes it's only like maybe once a week or maybe even once a month. Wow. And obviously it's very dependent on work. Yeah.
Yeah. That's got to be tough. Yeah, you're putting in big, long weeks, and things like that. But I'm glad, going back to the liver, I'm really glad you brought that up. I mean, that's something that I talk about a lot to clients that I'm working with, because liver has been touted to be the superfood, and we all have to have desiccated liver capsules, and you have to cook it every single day. But you're right. If you've ever harvested or processed an animal, you get hundreds of pounds of muscle, meat, and like maybe a 2 to 3 pound liver, depending upon, the size of the animal. Right. Yeah. And then the gurus on the internet are telling us we have to have this every single day. You'd be taking out a lot of animals to sustain that, which is not really realistic. So I love how you frame that and put language to helping people to conceptualize that. That's not to undermine some of the health benefits that could be achieved through having liver, but it's like, put it in context.
Well, but also it's like, when you're on a carnivore diet or even a keto diet, like you just need a different constellation of nutrients. And you'll actually need less of these things just for a lot of different reasons, For instance, like, our RDAs for vitamin C to stave off scurvy is 10 milligrams a day to not get scurvy, right? But when you're not eating carbohydrates and you're not eating plants, you actually need it in nanograms versus milligrams, all right? So this is the obscenely different amount that you need. And so if you're eating a mixed diet and you're eating a bunch of processed crap that don't have many nutrients and probably block a lot of nutrients and make it so that you need more of these basic nutrients, liver is probably your best friend. That's probably the only thing keeping some people alive. But when you're on a keto or carnivore diet, you really don't. And so this can become an excess very quickly. And certainly, eating supplements Why would you need supplements? If we're arguing that this is our natural, biologically appropriate, species-specific diet, you should not have to take any supplements whatsoever. Because, if you need supplements just to get basic nutrition, then by definition, your diet is deficient in those nutrients. And so, if you're eating naturally, it's not going to be by definition. So yeah, I certainly don't think you need to take supplements or anything like that. And, coincidentally enough, usually the people really pushing, that you have to take supplements to eat liver are usually the guys selling the supplements for liver, which is fine. I'm a big fan of people putting their money where their mouth is, and they believe in something like, hey, this is good for people. I'm going to start an industry behind it. I'm really all for that. I hope more people get involved in creating, products in the carnivore space and the keto space to help people get healthy. I'm all for that. But at the same time, there might be a conflict of interest there. And I certainly don't think, if you're eating a mixed diet though, fine, a liver supplement might be right up your alley, but not if you're just doing a carnivore diet.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
Botany class will tell you, anybody who studies horticulture or botany can certainly tell you this, that plants have different defenses because they're living organisms, and all living organisms have a defense against being eaten. While animals can run away or fight back, plants can't, and so they need to use other methods. And one of those methods is by being actively poisoned, making defense chemicals.